Wonderful. So like I mentioned, now that I have a little bit of information from you guys, I can give you a little info about myself. Like I said, my name is Sam Davidson, working for the Student Recruitment Office at the University of Manitoba. So myself, I am a graduate of the University of Manitoba through the Asper School of Business. I also am coming from my apartment in Winnipeg, Manitoba here. But originally I was born and raised in Portage-la-Prairie, Manitoba, which is about a 45-minute drive outside of Winnipeg. So enough about me. We'll talk a little bit more about why we're here and listening to this presentation today. So this is the parent and supporter session. So this session is geared towards, of course, you guys, the parents and supporters of prospective undergraduate students. So we understand that you guys play a pivotal role during these exciting times. You guys are encouraging and supporting your students' research and providing them with things like hope and guidance. So I'll get started with a little bit of an introduction of some of the sessions that you guys are familiar with as well. So as I mentioned, the parent and supporters session here is one of the last sessions of the fall term that we've been doing over the last few months. So some of the other programs have been the Introduction to University of Manitoba, academic programs, the application process, student supports, the Student Experience student series that we did, as well as information for international students, as well as Indigenous students as well. So for those of you that may have not been for those of you who haven't been able to attend or see any of these sessions in the past, we're actually going to be recording, we have recorded these sessions and they are available on our website. So what I'm going to do actually is a little bit later in the chat, I'm going to put a bunch of links to some of this information so that you guys have some quick access to it. So we've actually disabled the chat for this in the interest of time, but we will provide you guys with contact information at the end of the presentation here. So looking at this parent and information session, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, first from a more broad perspective, we're going to talk about why university in general, and then we're also going to speak specifically on why the University of Manitoba. In terms of the options or the routes that students can take from high school to university, we're going to talk about the difference between University 1 versus direct entry. We're going to look at some of the student supports that exist on the university campus. And we're also going to talk about the most exciting part, financing that post-secondary education. And then we're going to wrap things up with a bit of student privacy and then just some general information at the end. So to start off, let's look at a broader sense and think of, between any post-secondary institution, why university and what gives university students that advantage, or the university advantage, or the edge as we like to call it. So clearly there's a lot of different reasons why a post-secondary education is a great investment for prospective employers and students. So there's a couple things here that we like to highlight, these three areas here. So a post-secondary education really allows students to develop both specific textbook skills as well as what we like to refer to as transferable skills. So this encourages them to think critically and opens them up to unique new perspectives. So when I'm talking about transferable skills, what we're talking about here are things like communication skills. So things like writing and public speaking, presentation skills, critical thinking, teamwork, collaboration, and research, for example. A great example that I like to use here is that during my time at the Asper School, I was involved in about 13 different presentations and group projects that I had to do over my 4 years. So during that time, it really got me comfortable with collaborating with other individuals, some that I was familiar with and others that I had never met in those classrooms before. So not only were we collaborating to get to work on a project or a goal, we were also then conveying that information to a group of our peers. So I've had the opportunity to present in front of hundreds and hundreds of individuals at one time, to nowadays where I'm presenting to a handful of parents or students through a webcam presentation from my apartment here in Winnipeg. So it really allowed me to really have those skills that apply into the jobs and work that I've been doing in the future after that time as a student. So the other thing to think about here as well is that there's increased job prospects and earning potential as well. So when we talk about job prospects, over the last decade, there have been 1.7 million new jobs that have been created for university graduates. And that's really more than twice as many as those for college and trade graduates combined. And then the ones that students and parents like to think about as well is that earning potential. So university graduates can expect their salaries to grow roughly 70% over the first 8 years of working. And when we get back to business as usual, the universities of the world have a lot of practical experience in a variety of different programs. So we refer to these as co-op education. So these are things where not only are you getting that textbook knowledge through your coursework, but you're also able to go out into the real workforce and take that knowledge that you're learning in classes and apply them to a real work environment. So this is really great for graduating students as well, as they're looking out at prospective employers that are wanting to have students that have the skill set or have the practice. So not only are you able to beef up your resume by saying, not only have I graduated with these transferable skills, but I've actually been able to put these into practice in the real work environment. So you have that textbook knowledge and that experience that really makes you look impressive and gives you that advantage. So now that I've kind of talked broadly about the university landscape in a more general sense, let's talk more specific to the University of Manitoba. So you can see this really beautiful campus here from the skyline is the University of Manitoba's Fort Garry campus. So this is actually, the Fort Garry campus is one of two main campuses that the University of Manitoba has. So the Fort Garry campus is in the south end of Winnipeg, with our Bannatyne campus being housed in the downtown district of Winnipeg. A little bit more about the University of Manitoba is that at any time there's about 30,000 plus students studying in more than 100 academic programs. The University of Manitoba is a member of the U15. So this is Canada's 15 research intensive universities. And then another highlight as well is that the University of Manitoba is the only institution in the province, that have your professional programs, such as law, medicine, pharmacy, architecture, as a few examples there. So now that we've touched a bit on the university life and the University of Manitoba more specifically, let's take a look at entry options and the application process and timelines. So we talk about two different entry options, sort of the most common ones that students will see when they're coming out of high school. That would be University 1 or direct entry into a faculty. So there are these two options. In terms of University 1 is more of a more flexible sort of open first year that allows students a little more flexibility to explore courses at the university. Whereas direct entry is where you're getting a more direct path into a faculty if there's an area of interest that someone has more specific. So we'll talk a little bit more about the differences in the next slide. But we do want to make sure that people understand with University 1, it doesn't add any extra time to the degree. As you can see on the chart here, it's very synonymous with a direct entry year 1 versus University 1 year 1. And then you actually both diverge into your second year, where you're able to continue on with the program as if you were just continuing on. This example is for a 4-year degree, where University 1 versus direct entry doesn't really make a difference. So let's talk about why someone would choose University 1 versus direct entry learning. So in terms of University 1, it's highly recommended that if a student is either undecided or not 100% sure what program they're interested in, or maybe they have a couple of program options that they're undecided between, and they want to get some more information about both. Let's say, for example, a student is interested in business or also interested in kinesiology. So two very different program types, but with someone going into University 1, a student could go into that first general year and take some of those introductory business courses, as well as some of those introductory kinesiology courses. So that gives them time to understand the programs a little bit better, see if the information is something they can relate to, something that they're passionate about. And then going into their second year, they can use their university grades to pick one or the other to try and get entry into that program for continuing years in their university career. Direct entry, if the program of choice is what has that direct entry option and you know that's what you want to get into, then I highly recommend that students apply for that direct entry route. Things like business, engineering, agriculture, science, for example, if your student knows 100% this is where they want to go, then I would highly recommend that they take that direct entry route. We'll talk about which undergraduate programs have that direct entry option in the next slide as well. But there's a couple other distinguishing factors between these two options. So University One is also really great if a program requires 1 or more years of study to enter. So the good examples here would be architecture and nursing as examples. So for those, it requires at least 1 year of university study before someone can apply into those faculties. So what that means is someone would take University One, they would make sure they take the appropriate prerequisite courses for those programs, and then use those university grades and prerequisites to apply into nursing or architecture to get in their second year of university. Another reason that someone might go into University One over direct entry is that there are admission requirements for direct entry programs. So I'll use some arbitrary numbers here. Let's say someone in business wants to get into the business school and they require an 85% average in their high school grades. So if I come in with an 80%, I wouldn't necessarily be able to get into the business program. However, University One would have a lower threshold for grades. Maybe it's 60%, for example. So I'm not able to do the direct entry option, but I can go into University One with my 80% average, still take those intro business courses, so I'm not missing out or adding any more time, and then using my university marks in my first year to apply into the business school for the second year, for example. And then one other distinguishing fact with these as well is that academic advisors for University One, they specialize more in the transition from high school into the university setting, where academic advisors in direct entry programs are more exclusive to the chosen academic field. So engineering academic advisors are strictly program related to engineering, business to business, science and science, for example. So like I mentioned, here are the undergraduate programs that we have in totality. And you'll notice that there are some of them in boldface print. So these bolded programs are the ones that have the direct entry option available. So a student could apply into these directly out of high school. And as long as they meet those admission requirements, then they might be able to enter these programs. So now that we talk about the programs in general, undergraduate programs, let's talk a little bit more on the application side of things and what that timeline might look like. So for anyone with a grade 12 student that will be applying into the fall 2021, so the applications have been open for fall 2021 since October. So the students, I've linked it in the chat that I'll be sending out later, but the application page is available for students to look it up and fill in with any information that they have. The next sort of important date for this presentation, if there's anything that I can hammer home that you guys need to remember out of this presentation, it's that March 1st application deadline for most of our direct entry programs. The only exception to this rule is the Faculty of Music is January 15th. And the reason for this is the Desautels Faculty of Music has also some additional requirements like an audition and some testing that is required for admission purposes as well. So for most every other direct entry program, March the 1st is that ever important deadline. The other benefits of that March 1st deadline is that all students that apply before that March 1st deadline will be considered for entrance scholarships, and we'll touch base more on that a little bit later. Also, for our Manitoba students, that March 1st deadline is very important because your grades and transcripts will automatically be sent to the University of Manitoba as long as they apply before that March 1st date. So for May and June, this is typically around the time when official admission offers are issued. And then in June, this is when the timeline for the accepting of an offer of admission is usually required. And then in July, for the students that are from outside of Manitoba, as well as those that did not apply by that March 1st deadline, July would be the time where you had to ensure that you got your final grades, your transcripts to the university admissions office so that they can be processed in your for your offer of admission. Something else that's important to note for the application page is all communications are done via the email address provided by the applicant in that form. So we are constantly touching base with the individual who's applied, and we do it through the email address that they supply us. So we do encourage you to encourage your students to be checking these emails just to make sure that they are able to get all the information sessions under their belt, understand if there's any hiccups or any sort of changes to the timeline, but all that information should be going to that one email address. So next we'll talk a little bit, we've gone over a bit of the program and timeline of application. So let's talk about what students can expect in terms of supports. So like we mentioned, there was a whole presentation done on the different student supports, and even that doesn't truly do it justice in terms of what's all available for students at the University of Manitoba. So first we'll talk a little bit about academic supports that exist. So with academic supports, one of the main, or one of the ones that we like to highlight, is actually the professors of the courses themselves. So it can be a little daunting thinking of, for the student's perspective, to come from a high school teacher environment to a university professor environment. And I can say, even from my own personal experience, that professors not only are very knowledgeable about the information and the coursework that they're teaching, but they're also very passionate about sharing that knowledge with students in general as well. So the university has professors with dedicated office hours for each of the courses. They're required to have a couple hours a week where they're able to make themselves available for students to come by and ask any questions, concerns, if they have any supplemental information that's needed. The professor is there solely to help them make sure they understand and get the most out of the course. On the other side, there are some courses that have teaching assistants as well. So these individuals could be individuals that have taken the courses in the past, or they could even be PhD candidate students that are very well versed in the information as well. And they're a supplemental instruction for students that can come and find these individuals with office hours as well and ask any of those questions and just have that extra availability to factor in too. With academic advising, we have a really great program called Achieve. So the Achieve resource looks at the courses students have completed and what is outstanding in order to meet that degree requirement. Students can stay on track by supplementing a meeting with an advisor by using this Achieve app to run an audit, see sort of the requirements needed to obtain that degree, but they can also test drive some information about other degree programs by running a bit of a what if scenario as well. Next on the list here, we have our Academic Learning Center. So one of the great things about the Academic Learning Center is their availability of tutors. So these tutors are available by appointment and can assist with things like study skills, content writing, and it's really important to note that all of these different academic supports, they're completely cost-free to the University of Manitoba students. There are also workshops available to improve things like your research and writing skills, literature review, paraphrasing, citations, essay organizations. Honestly, when I was a student in university, my passion was not in citation, research, and writing. It just wasn't an area that I was as keen on doing, and it just wasn't one of my strengths. But tutors were really able to help me and correct my citations and make sure I knew at least how to do the very basics to be able to succeed in my university courses, because I didn't realize going into university how important it was in essays and papers how important those citations were. So it was really a great benefit for me to have someone who is smarter than me and more passionate about this topic to really show me how to make the most of my time and support my academic success as well. The Academic Learning Center also facilitates group study sessions. So these are held weekly for select courses and are facilitated by a peer mentor, someone who's more versed in the course as well. And they really facilitate problem solving, comparing notes, discussion questions, etc. The Academic Learning Center also has a collection of tip sheets to help students with different tasks, things like time management, studying and self-care, grammar, reading, note-taking, you name it, it's there. They even have videos housed within their website that assist students on honing their skills with things like problem solving, reading textbooks, writing academic papers, and more. The last thing I'll mention as well is that there are English as additional language specialists that instruct and help for assistance in students improving their academic English skills as well. So now that we've touched on the academic side of things, we'll take a look at the personal supports that exist or highlight some of the main ones that we like to talk about as well. So it's not only important for students to be academically successful, but we want to make sure from a personal standpoint to get to that classroom and to go beyond the classroom is a really important facet that is very, can go a little unnoticed in the university career. So when we talk about some of our main highlights here, we talk about things like the Office of Accessibility. So the Office of Accessibility, part of its main function is to support students with disabilities, but it's not just the sole purpose of that, of the office. They also can assist students that have need assistance with note-taking and exam accommodations, for examples as well. One thing we like to hit home is that arranging for academic accommodations and support does take some time. So we highly encourage your student to contact the accessibility office before applying for admission, as well as immediately after accepting that offer of admission, in order to make sure the transition to university life is as seamless and successful as possible. In terms of the personal counseling sessions, we have a lot of different resources on both campuses, both in the UMSU University Center location, as well as the Bannatyne campus, as well as our Migiziagamik, which is the Bald Eagle Lodge, and throughout specific faculties as well. There's a lot of different self-help resources for students that are in need as well. And then finally, we also take a look at the career planning side of things. So there's the Career Services Department that's there to assist with career planning, job searches, career mentors, employment resources. And the great thing about these is these aren't just solely for students. There are tons of different workshops and events that students can attend even as alumni once they've graduated from the university. It's important to know that the University of Manitoba wants to make sure that we're helping students from before they enter the front door to even after they've exited out that back door. We want to make sure students are well aware that we're here for them every single step of the way. So now it's time to talk about the most popular in terms of parents and supporters, and that's financing that education. So in terms of the cost of university, to give you a rough estimate, we have put here a little bit of a table that kind of gives you an idea of what domestic versus international costs will look like. So there's tuition for the actual courses that students register for. There's also some fringe costs as well in terms of things like books, student fees, supplies. So those are some of the costs that you may expect to budget for. So you can see the totals on the bottom there. There are a couple things to note about this estimate as well. So tuition fees really range by program. So someone in the Faculty of Arts would not necessarily be paying the same amount as someone in the Faculty of Engineering, for example. The other thing to note too is that depending on how many courses a student is taking. So in one semester, one student taking 4 courses versus another student taking 5 would most definitely be paying different rates of tuition. Tuition and student fees are assessed after course registration in August. And that's so we know how many courses and in which programs they're registered for those courses. So there's 2 fee payment deadlines. In the fall term, it's in October, and in the winter term, it's in February. And also tuition fees can be paid online through online banking. The University of Manitoba can be registered as a payee, and that will allow students to, within a matter of minutes, have their costs and tuitions paid for. So now that we've talked about sort of some estimated on cost, let's talk a little bit more about some financial relief. So these are things like awards, bursaries, scholarships. So like I mentioned, when I was hounding back that March 1st deadline, students who apply before March 1st are automatically considered for entrance scholarships based on their interim grades. So when I talk about interim grades, I'm talking about in their grade 12 year, the finals of their first semester and the midterms of their second semester. Entrance scholarships are academic based and they range from $1,000 to $3,000. So that's a really good chunk of change for to take a good bite out of the first year tuition. So it's highly encouraged that students do apply before that March 1st deadline. Also, we did talk about the entrance scholarships, but I have to tell you guys, there is a plethora of different bursaries and scholarships that exist through the awards database on the university's financial aid and award site. I'll put that link in the chat near the end as well, just so you guys have that resource too. So not only is it important to look at awards through the University of Manitoba, but we also want to make sure that you guys understand about external financial supports as well. In terms of student aid, the province of Manitoba and the government of Canada offers national student loans and provincial student loans. Through your financial institution, there are student bank loans, as well as different external scholarships and bursary awards just throughout your community. Coming from Portage, I had something called the Portage Community Foundation, which was a great way to, basically it was a Portage-based award that I got for being a student from Portage that's going into business. And I was able to get an extra $3,000 over 3 years just from finding that award and being the only person that applied for that bursary 2 years in a row. So it just goes to show, like the Winnipeg Foundation, for example, different community foundations, private businesses, charitable organizations. You can find a plethora of different options when it comes to financing your education. And one thing I just want to touch base on the previous slide that I talked about, the awards database that I was talking about, it's not necessarily just it's not just based on academic success as well. There are some awards that are just based solely on the program of study that a student is going into. It can be based on written for international students or for Indigenous identifying students as well. Extracurricular activity and leadership and volunteerism is another hot topic for some of these bursaries and awards as well. So between the University of Manitoba awards and these external financial supports, we're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars that are out there just waiting for students to collect and put towards their tuition costs. It's not uncommon to see students pay for their entire first year, and for some, their entire university degree can be paid solely off bursaries and scholarships. So I highly encourage people to take that time just to make sure they can see, do a Google search and take a look for what other bursaries and scholarships might exist as well. So now that we've talked about the financing side of things, we're just going to kind of wrap it up with the balancing support and privacy. So like I mentioned, you guys are playing a vital and crucial role in your students as they explore their post-secondary options and prepare for their first year of university. At the same time, the university staff and academic advisors strive to promote student independence. And what that also means is that we have to adhere to the principles of the FIPPA and FIA Act. So Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act and Personal Health Information Act. So we want to make sure that not only that we're upholding that student independence, but we want to make sure that you guys are guiding them on that path into student independence as well. So when we talk about FIPPA and FIA, what that really means for you guys is that without your students' consent, you will not have access to information such as the status of their admission offer, university grades, health, counseling, records, things like that, for example, without written consent from the student themselves. So finally, we've talked a bit about some of the fall presentations that we did here, but we do have a lot of upcoming information sessions for the new year. So like I said, a lot of this information is being shared with the students at large, but just to give you an idea of what to look out for, in February, we're going to have some more applicant information sessions because that March 1st deadline will be approaching so quickly. We want to make sure that students are feeling comfortable and ready to fill in that application process with no issues. For April and May, we'll be doing next steps for new students. So that will be giving them an idea of what the future will look like once they accept their offers. And then in June and July, once those offers of admission are accepted, then we're going to be preparing them for things like course registration and faculty-specific information sessions as well. And then in August, once we're getting ready to send the kids off to their first year of university, we're going to be talking about preparation for the week, an event called Preparation Week, as well as new student orientation there. So once again, I'd love to thank you guys for your support. Investing your time with me here this afternoon is a really great way to show that you want to support and guide your students. And we want to make sure that we're giving you and your student as much opportunity as possible to ensure that they're able to succeed both on an academic, personal, and financial means as well. So if there are any questions or concerns, we highly encourage your students to contact us at the two of the following email addresses here. So we have student_recruitment@umanitoba.ca, as well as indigenous.community@umanitoba.ca. We also have a information for parents. It's a bit of a long hyperlink at the bottom there, but we are, if you do, I will link it in the chat right away here. But if you even Google resources for parents on the umanitoba.ca search bar, then you'll be able to find it pretty quickly.